To discuss this in more detail, Northwestern University professor of political science, Hurd, joins me now from Chicago. Ian, good to have you on the show. So Ukraine is submitting this application claiming that Russia must be held accountable for manipulating the notion of genocide to justify this aggression. I want to ask you, is this somewhat of a symbolic move by Ukraine? Because as far as I understand, it's not very clear whether or not the ICJ will have a jurisdiction.
Well, it's pretty clear that the body of international law over the last 50 or 100 years has designed to outlaw exactly this kind of invasion that Russia has perpetrated or is trying to execute. And so the Ukrainians have found a lot of support among international organizations, the UN among others. The UN can help with some of the political response, but on the legal side, it's really the International Court of Justice whose main job is to decide legal disputes between countries. What Ukraine is asking for is for this court to declare that Russia has been kind of misusing the Genocide Convention by claiming that Ukraine is planning a genocide. And on the question of jurisdiction, there's a narrow slice there where it's quite possible that the court will decide that because Russia has been talking about genocide, that invokes the Genocide Convention, a treaty against genocide, and that might actually give an opening for Ukraine to pursue a legal case against Russia indeed.
Ian, I want to ask you why you think we're seeing such a strong reaction to the Russian invasion at this level. I mean, there are dozens of examples of countries choosing to invade other countries and violate sort of UN charters and the principles of sovereignty and territorial integrity.
I think that Putin's Russia has managed to alienate a good number of other governments and a good swath of world public opinion over the years. So it's finding itself at the moment quite isolated. It's a little bit without friends because it has operated as a bully for quite a long time. And eventually that causes your supporters to lose interest. When your time of difficulty comes, no one's coming to your aid. It seems to be what Russia is discovering now. So at the General Assembly and at the Security Council in the United Nations, Russia has been standing more or less alone, making it clear that this attack is really Putin's personal escapade, and he doesn't have a lot of backing. He doesn't have a lot of support. He doesn't have a lot of allies. We're seeing this then with things like FIFA and the Formula One group and all these companies deciding that they would rather not do business with Putin's Russia. It's the culmination of a long buildup of alienation that Putin's style of governance, his autocracy, has accomplished for his country. It's really quite sad.
Indeed. Ian, I mean, to add insult to injury, another court, the International Criminal Court, the ICC, has also announced that it's going to be launching an investigation into war crimes and crimes against humanity. How does this differ between with the ICJs?
The ICJ is in charge of legal disputes between governments, usually over the interpretation of a treaty like the Genocide Convention. The International Criminal Court, the ICC, decides on individual criminal responsibility for things like crimes against humanity and war crimes. So the ICC is a much more dangerous court for a dictator because it can create individual liability. It sends world leaders to prison, quite literally to prison, for these sorts of crimes. And it has jurisdiction over what happens in Ukraine. And it looks like the prosecutor's office is eager to investigate. It's unclear how all that will shake out, but as a legal matter, it creates liability for every single Russian soldier who might be committing war crimes or crimes against humanity in the country, plus all of their leaders, all the commanders, all the way up to Putin. Each of those people could be individually criminally responsible and charged by this court.
So a much more far-reaching probe. All right, Hurd, I'm afraid we're going to have to leave it there. Thank you very much for joining us here on TRT World. I do appreciate the explanation and the analysis. Thank you.